All right, everybody, this is SIC Talks number 119. I'm here with Matt Muir, who I'm just meeting, but whose work I've been reading for years as Web Curios, the newsletter, which if you don't subscribe to it, you should immediately go subscribe. Or don't. He and I clearly have some ambivalent feelings about our output in the newsletter verse, which we'll talk about because I've got an announcement today. But in any case, Matt's over in London in the Vauxhall section of the old Smoke, and I'm here in Greenpoint, relegated upstairs for my normal position because my wife's on a call. So there you go. The absurdity of the modern work condition. Anyway, Matt, before we went live, Matt and I were just shooting the shit about how Brooklyn feels at the moment, given the, as Matt said, febrile conditions here. Well, everywhere, really. Everywhere is febrile. But I was saying it actually feels great. It's like New York, it feels like New York continues to be the exception to the K-shaped rule that we are all living under. I wonder if London feels the same.
London, I mean, how do I describe this? London feels... Okay, so on the one hand, London is a brilliant, vibrant city that's amazing to live in. We have incredible theatre, music, restaurants. Despite what people tell you, British food is now actually quite good. You can come here and eat. It's stereotypes I feel the need to push back against. But equally, it costs you like fucking $50 to leave your house every day just because of the tax of being in a big city. And everything is broken and fucked. Everyone looks and feels miserable.
More so than the standard British condition.
I mean, we're pessimists by nature.
I'm married to a Brit, so you just okay, cool. I'm well acquainted.
So I mean, we have a tendency towards being downbeat and towards being pessimistic, and that is fairly accurately known. But generally speaking, I think it's fair to say that we have seen a general degradation in the quality of life for everybody, and that's pretty much across the board, leaving aside the 1%, but fuck them, since 2008. And it's been compounded by a variety of stupid decisions that have been taken by other countrymen of mine, particularly Brexit, regards to the European Union and things.
Yes,
and I'm old enough to remember the late 90s or the mid 90s when at the tail end of the Thatcherite regime, at the end of the 80s, when Britain really was fucked in its doldrum, and how tired London used to feel when everything was just a little bit shabby and kind of scrubby around the edges. And the city feels like that again. It feels like a city that's in the doldrums, and it feels poor. And that's what's really interesting. Like the contrast, if you go to New York, for example, the contrast between the ambient sense of prosperity, leaving aside obviously wealth disparity, which is a universal ill, the general sense of ambient wealth that you feel in New York compared to that which you feel in London is significantly higher, I would say. And I think there's a sense to it whereby we're just kind of starting to realize now that fuck, the next century, we're not going to be anywhere near the top of that pile. Culturally, economically, we don't matter. It's quite a strange feeling. I'm not going to lie.
No, well, I would imagine that to be the case for similar reasons. Being however many generations removed from rural Britannia, you're still indoctrinated with that sense of like world-beating, superiority, and certainly we as Americans feel that intrinsically, much to our discredit. But we kind of can't help it. The thing that's interesting, and you mentioned Brexit, I was in Europe the day that the Brexit vote happened, and I was about to go on holiday with my family, with my wife's family. We went to a dinner, and I just said to them, I was like, wow, you guys must be really like stunned by this decision. And they're like, isn't it great? We all voted for it. And I'm like, I almost had a meltdown. I was like, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Like, you don't understand at all how the global system works and benefits you as the holders of all of this institutional power? Like, what are you doing? And the reason I bring it up is not to say told you so, because I know I wouldn't have had to explain it to you at the time, but more because we are now doing exactly the same thing.
I was about to make the exact same parallel.
And I wonder, but clearly the effects are not happening immediately. I mean, even like we have a relief rally of where the the NASDAQ is up 4% yesterday. It's like we clearly we're not feeling the pain yet, but you're noticing this 10 years on makes me feel like come back to this conversation in 2036 and we will be.
I mean,
it'll be a similar feeling on our end.
Without wishing to get into the very, very miserable weeds of geopolitics, because fuck knows there are enough places you can get that sort of analysis from people.
Yeah, for sure.
Better qualified than you and I. But you just need to look at a couple of little indicators. So, fertilizer. Fertilizer is one of the things that in the past sort of like 3-4 days has started to be talked of as something that's significantly produced in that region that is going to be subject to delays as a result of straits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, there is less fertilizer, food production suffers downstream of this. The thing is, we always think about it in a localized context, but the fertilizer shortages are also going to apply based on where the fertilizer is coming from, where it has to travel from, to places with significantly greater food precariety than we have in Europe. Yep. So like Africa is going to be affected by the food fertilizer shortage, which means that in about a year's time, you're going to see the knock-on effects of it.
Right.
Which means that just after that, we're going to see an increase in the flood of poor fuckers coming from sub-Saharan Africa, desperately in search of a better life, to a country where maybe they're not going to starve or where food scarcity isn't so much of an issue, which has not. It's the fractal nature of this stuff is that which people obviously don't have a handle on because global systems are now too complex for any single individual to have anything resembling a picture of how they work. But because that's true. But man, fuck me, is it funny watching people over on the other side of the world doing exactly the same. Hey, we don't really care about the long-term impact of what we're about to do because fuck the future that we did 10 years ago. Or at least it would be funny were we not having to wake up every morning and go, hang on, what mad cunt over there done overnight and how's that going to fuck my life up over the course of the next 6 months? Because that, I have to say, is becoming very wearing.
Do you, okay, so as not to turn this into a pity party, right, which we certainly could for myriad reasons. One of the things that I love about Web Curios, which is the newsletter that you publish on Fridays, is that it goes wide and it goes deep, and that you find little tidbits that are, some of them are dark and dystopian and depressing, and some of them are really like joyful and just ebullient. Do you see any silver lining in the idea that London returns to this sort of like pre-ZERP era grittiness, and then therefore new opportunities come out of availability?
Okay, so
I get
so I also have to preface
this
with the fact that, and I think I can say this with a degree of freedom. You and I are probably demographically not dissimilar in terms of our ages and things like that. Like, I'm a middle-aged white man, and on that basis, I'm the worst person in fucking London to be talking to about cultural renaissance in the city and all the rest of it. Because if culture is having a renaissance, it sure as fuck ain't happening with me, and it would be very sad if it were. But that said, I do think that whilst clubs and things are kind of being squeezed as a result of rising rents, etc., what you are seeing a lot more of is DIY club nights and people just kind of scrubbing together and doing their own stuff. A resurgence of warehouse parties and raves that I may not go to, but I hear about on the grapevine.
For sure.
Artistic communities continue to exist. They just move to different parts of the city, and they are continuing to be able to bring up and things like that. And traditionally speaking, there's always been, even if only in the popular imagination, a correlation between straitened economic times and cultural growth and, imagination, people railing against this. The difficult thing is that the last time we had a situation like that in the UK was in the 1980s, which was, in many respects, a big time of cultural fertility. The music scene in the city and the country in the 1980s, and even up into the 1990s, was world-leading, vibrant, and exciting. The difference then was that was enabled by state-subsidized unemployment benefits.
Right.
It meant that it was literally possible for somebody to not have a job, but to be able to subsist to the point where they could make art and not have to worry about starving to death or being homeless. Those conditions don't maintain anymore. Like, it is significantly harder for someone to find themselves in that position. So on the one hand, I'm kind of vaguely positive about the fact that the kids are still continuing to do stuff and things are bubbling around the edges and people are finding ways around constraints imposed against them by economics. On the other hand, the constraints imposed on people by economics are very fucking real, and it is hard to make art and hard to create culture when you are imperiled. And yeah,
okay, so that's interesting. Where do you find yourself in terms of the art you make? And yes, I'm gonna grant it that designation.
you are very
Web
kind.
Curios is inspired, and look, it's a particular kind of 2020s art. I think that maybe I'm participant in at some level or another. There are many others who do it well, but you have a particular kind of, I don't know, poetry to your musings that I find very compelling. Do you think of that as being your creative expression? Is it for you, like it is for me, more a mental health exercise? Like how does Curios come together creatively for you
I mean,
or manifest creatively?
I can't speak to your experience, but like it's fucking therapy. If I am literally taking the inside of my head and vomiting it out.
Right.
It's me taking a laxative every Friday morning because otherwise my brain would be constipated with information. I just need to get that somewhere. Sorry, that's a horrible image for all of you. But it is literally just an expression of the inside of my head. There are lots and lots and lots of different ways to make that and put it on the internet, and all are valid, and most of them are beautiful. Many of them are beautiful. Some of them are. But for me, it's the inside of my head writ on a page, and it's what I have found that week, and that I think is interesting, that I feel I have something to say about, or crucially that I think will resonate with someone else, because again, the way everyone uses the web is personal and different and individual. But to me, the thing that I've always found exciting and interesting about the web is the ability to take something that I think is interesting and bring it to an audience of other people who might find it interesting as well and might be able to do something with it. And that's
Right.
it. That's all I've ever wanted to be, is somebody who takes something and goes, this is interesting. Look at it. Like, what the fuck you do with that afterwards? None of my business. And frankly, less of my concern. I just want to alert you to stuff that I think is cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, fun, interesting, weird, horrifying, emotional, poignant, miserable, vomit-inducing, any of these great emotional triggers.
I do the same thing, I think. Ooh,
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
that's
there's yours has more of a kind of canonically marketing, advertising kind of focus, but broadly speaking, yeah, there are parallels there, I think. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. The Sorry, there was a little bit of feedback on the line a second ago, which is what I was reacting to. It's gone. Seems to be gone now. The thing that I was going to say though is that I think what you do very well is apply that thinking lens to it. I am very much in the showing this to you, heads up, make your own conclusions about it, maybe illustrating a little bit of the patterns. You get in and comment. And so it is, I envy that because I don't, I mean, A, like I don't have the composure to put it together, but B, to be as opinionated about as broad ranging a set of topics as you are is, I think, uncommon. And what I wondered about,
it's wildly hubristic, is what it is. But you're very kind.
so from whence does this hubris spawn? Did you like I talk a lot about the fact that I grew up in a DIY hardcore music scene. I grew up at a time when music was changing and things like club culture and rave culture came in and collided with this kind of punk ethos. I have spent my entire life skateboarding, and you see the world a different way, like literally see the world a different way when you get into that. And I just wonder, do you come out of any of those subcultures? Is this your prodigious schooling? Is it your, training and apprenticeship?
Where's
it come from?
It's a very omnivorous mind and ability. I've always had an ability to read incredibly quickly and pass information incredibly quickly. Like that's just and unfortunately now my special superpower is being fucked by LLMs. See, this is what happens. You get old, and the one thing that you're good at gets absolutely fucking rinsed by technology. But to go back to the original point, like the reason The reason you can't do what I do is not because you're not intellectually capable. It's because, let's be honest about this, you need people to pay you money for consultancy, and you can't go around telling everyone that they're dicks in the same way that I can, because I don't need to, or I don't care about earning consultancy money. And that's a choice I made about 6 years ago. But frankly, even before that, it was I would rather be able to share an opinion than I would not, if that makes sense. And also,
100%. So what is the balance then? How do you subsist in this kind of modern creator's condition?
It always used to be. So the career background is I've always worked in communications traditionally. Anyway, I've been a lobbyist. I've been a corporate PR. I've been a video games PR. I've been an arts and cultural PR. I've been a strategist. I've been a digital strategist. I like, a panoply of fucking wanky job titles, mainly within PR, communications, marketing, and advertising. And I've also been a journalist for the past 13 years. There's a magazine here in the UK that I've had a column with for 13 years, writing about social media and latterly artificial intelligence. And so basically I've now pivoted towards doing more journalism and less consultancy, because if I'm 100% honest, and I feel like I can't be a good shit, I was finding that working in and around agencies was making me very, very, very angry and very upset. And I thought it was probably best to stop doing that before I killed either someone else or myself. So yeah.
I read something with you saying that you had started Web Curios as a sort of intra-agency dispatch. Is that right? Did I get that?
Yeah. So this is in about 2010. I was working for an agency which no longer exists, part of WPP, called Hill and Knowlton, which also used to exist in the States. In fact, it's an American agency originally, if I remember correctly. Oh yes, I remember the Hill and Knowlton links with the Iran hostage situation. That was a fabulous time in the world of PR. You can look that up on Wikipedia, guys. It's there. Anyway, so I was working for them, and it was in 2010. So the agency was very concerned with the idea that we should all be encouraging our clients to blog, get involved with this new exciting world of content. And to do that, we had to prove that we ourselves understood this. And so everyone in the agency was invited to, if they wanted to, set up a blog on the corporate website. And so I decided I'd do one about shit I found on the internet, because, thought it would be interesting. And I realized very, very quickly that whilst other people outside of the agency read it, no one senior within the agency read it at all, which meant that I could say whatever the fuck I liked. And there was one, which I think is the example you're referring to. There was one particularly wonderful moment where I wrote something. It was the beginning of June, which was a period of time when both the Lions in Cannes were happening, but also Glastonbury Festival were happening. Literally, they were happening at the same time. And I wrote something in my opening paragraph about how none of my colleagues were in the office because they were all either in a field in Somerset getting boxed off their tits on pills, or snorting cocaine off the tanned midriffs of hookers on the Quizette. And then I went for lunch, and I got quite pissed. I got a phone call about 2 hours later from a very, very, very anxious head of digital in New York, who was to be my big, big boss, saying that, yeah, they had taken that one down, and I probably shouldn't write anything about all my colleagues taking drugs ever again. So, yeah, it did start out as a corporate thing, but obviously stopped being the first way.
Well, that is the thing that I find interesting. So SIC started the same way, right? And as a matter of fact, I'm writing about that today a little bit. It started, I began to get very frustrated as Vice got big with the fact that I had to explain things happening in culture to people who were much younger than me, who I felt like, you should know what's going on, guys. Like, you should be telling me what's going on, not me having to explain to you what's happening. And so I started sending it around in this kind of passive-aggressive way. It was originally called Sharing is Caring, because I was such a condescending dick about it. And but it was interesting. It found purchase immediately with executives, and partially because I was part of that team and because they were my peers, but partially also because I think they found like, okay, yes, we need to have a broad grasp of what's going on, because it makes us culturally richer. It makes us the most interesting people at the party, so on and so forth. And it was the younger people that I had trouble getting on board, because they were just like, why is dad yelling at me? Which is fair enough. But the thing that I find interesting about your starting in that sort of, let's call it corporate universe, starting from that corporate universe, is that you really are, you get into the deep corners of the web. And I can imagine it being hard at some point for, like, let's call it a junior account planner, to be like, yeah, I understand how this fucking weird thing that Matt pointed to me actually tracks back to my daily experience, where I've got to churn out a brief for,
All right.
a radio spot or whatever. And
so I've always been of the opinion that one of the worst things about people who work in advertising and marketing, and also by extension PR, we can kind of lump them all in together, is the extent to which they seemingly apply their curiosity solely to their own disciplines. If you only get your ideas and inspiration from looking at the list of shit that won some fucking awards, or the shit that Marketing Week writes about, or the shit that the Drum writes about, your work is going to be boring and reductive, and an LLM can fucking do it, because now it can look at the same fucking sources as you can, if that's what you're looking at. Like, there is nothing interesting, culturally, certainly nothing interesting about advertising eating itself. It's a very, very boring and self-regarding and fundamentally tedious way of approaching the work. And it doesn't result in interesting responses to briefs. Like, it simply doesn't. The best account wins that I ever had when doing those godforsaken jobs were ones when I was allowed to do the weird thing. And because it's different, it's unexpected. If the strategy is right, then the weird thing makes sense, and you can sell it comfortably because you've done the thinking, you can back it up, and it doesn't look like anyone else's. And differentiation is so important, increasingly now, for fuck's sake. And one of the best ways to differentiate yourself is to have different and better sources of inspiration from whence you then draw your ideas. And breadth is vital for that. And just because you don't think, I don't know, the weird teledildonic startup in Macau is necessarily relevant to the corporate communications brief. It might be. You never know. Just kind of think of it, right?
I mean, the Internet of Things, at the very least, right? Like,
yeah, there you go. And there we have a through line. That's it. Build the deck. We're done.
Oh man. Well, in any case, I find it illuminating. I find it, I find it overwhelming at times. And I know people tell me that about my newsletter all the time too. It's like, they're just like, Ben, I have to sort of sit and make time for it, because otherwise I feel overwhelmed. How about you? Do you feel overwhelmed by it? Like, I am getting to a stopping point, and partially it's because of the overwhelming nature of just the information space at the moment, but also because I'm just sort of like, I wonder if I give myself a little bit of distance, if I'll be able to find the through line a little bit more clearly again.
I do know what you mean. I mean, fuck me, the volume. I suppose the difficulty that I have is that the journalism that I do requires, like, I do news journalism, which means that I have to look at the news a lot. And that does require a certain degree of, I put my face in the fire hose of shit and I just close my eyes. So there's an extent to which I can't stop doing that. So if I'm going to have to be facing the fire hose, I might as well have a broad spectrum fire hose, right? But there are some limits. Like, I don't use TikTok, I don't use Instagram. Stuff that I come across on those platforms, I come across through other people, because I've never liked television. It's not something I'm interested in. Those platforms are basically television. Like, you know what, I can leave it. Similarly, I don't do podcasts because there are simply not enough hours in the day, and I can't. I just can't. So, there are self-defined limits, and I have my sources. I tend to shy away from anything with an algorithmic feed, because I don't personally tend to find it particularly helpful for my own discovery, though others may vary. But no, look, dude, let me be very clear about this. In an ideal world, I don't know, someone pays me a really healthy 6-figure annual salary to do God knows what the fuck it would be. But yeah, I don't do this shit anymore.
Yeah, it is an interesting It is an interesting conundrum. All right. Well, so Matt, the ostensible purpose for this show was that I like to get on with people that I find interesting and inspiring and just, I'm curious about, and ask them where they get their material.
Yes.
So what I'm interested partially in how you reflect against stuff that's in today's newsletter. I shared an advanced copy, but also I'm just interested to know, like, how do you find stuff? What, not what your trade secrets are exactly, but like where you find yourself inspired. And you've just talked a lot about like the things that you don't do.
Yeah.
So I would love to talk a little bit about some of the things that you do, as well as some of the stuff this week.
So weirdly, it's not weirdly. This is one of the discovery mechanisms to draw at the moment. I have a violent newsletter expenditure problem. You know that drill candles tweet? That's me, but with newsletters. This is why my family is starving. So as like all like fucking, I sort of hate this term, but all internet curation, for want of a better term for it, is kind of a massive collaborative effort. There's a core of about 100 people, I'd say, maybe 150 in the English language internet, who do heavy lifting around finding and sharing and distributing interesting things. Some in certain niches, others in others. But basically, it's kind of like in my head, I have an ecosystem of people that probably numbers about 100, 150. So it's a lot of it's from those people. Social media still every now and again. And like I've ended up on Blue Sky because it's a text-based network. I like text. It's not owned by a Nazi, and it's not full of cunts pretending they're Steve Jobs, which is what LinkedIn is. So I've ended up there by default, even though it's boring and it's scoldy and its knee-jerk approach to AI irritates the fuck out of me, but it's where I found it out. But there's some stuff on there you can curate reasonably well there as well. Then there's probably, I don't know, about 30 odd websites that I visit on a daily basis that do their own kind of curation type thing. And then part of it is like, I'm lucky now that I people send me stuff. Like if people have made something that they think I might find interesting and I might want to share with an audience, they will email me about it, which is genuinely lovely. And it's a combination of all of those things. But for the most part, I am literally just reading the work of other people like myself, cherry picking bits of it I think I find interesting, I can say something about, and then on we go from there. Effectively, it's all of this curatorial economy is a massive circle jerk, basically, isn't it? Let's be honest. But it's a nice friendly one, a fun one.
Well, that is certainly true. Well, first of all, one of the ways that we became acquainted was that you referred me, or you referred SIC to Caitlin Dewey's a link from links I would GChat use, like your favorite newsletter or his favorite newsletters, and which I was very flattered by. And one of the things you said basically was like, despite all of the stuff I read, this guy seems to find a few things that I somehow don't. And I have thought a lot about that in the interim because I don't really understand. I wonder which things I gravitate to that you don't naturally see already. You know what I mean?
Stuff that is more specifically industry/discipline focused.
Got it.
Given the fact that for 6 years, I haven't really had to spend any professional time thinking about selling people things they neither want nor need. I don't tend to come across so much specifically alpha marketing PR related stuff.
Right. Okay.
So things that tend towards that end of the spectrum, things that you share are genuinely new to me. And also, I have probably, and this is just by dint of geography and sources, I have probably a more European perspective than you do. And there's a lot of North American specific stuff that I tend not to see because I try and, no disrespect to all of the North Americans, but you are a very heavy cultural presence in the world. And attempting to decouple from your center of gravity, I think, is probably a good thing that everybody who is in North America, even those who are, probably ought to maybe attempt to do so a little bit more than we currently do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, A, getting out from under the algorithm, B, trying to be curious about foreign sources such that you can access, in a language that you can understand, or at the very least in a sort of an oeuvre that you can understand. And And then beyond that, I think there are certain sort of index points. Like you include a lot of artwork in the newsletter. I don't know what your relationship to any of that artwork is. You will cite music fairly frequently. I don't know if that's because you're you've already said you're not a nightclubber or a
Not
like
anymore. So
warehouse raver anymore, right? But you and I are probably similar in those regards. So I wonder if there are like favorite sources or I don't know, schools of thought or whatever that you find particularly fertile.
I mean, for the artworks, there are a couple of websites and social media accounts that I take those from, but I credit the artist, which is the important thing. So, and then the mixes is either stuff that people send me or it's people I know. I know quite a few people who are Bedford DJs. I am so old, Ben, that I have one of my very good friends. His daughter is now 25 and is now an international superstar DJ who is in fact supporting DJ Tiesto in New York.
Is that right?
Yeah. In fact, either just has done or I think did last week. So yeah, some person like basically just posters.
All right. Well, who's the DJ?
She's she's called Oppidan, Oppidan. I recommend her unreservedly. If she ever finds out she'll be so unimpressed. But yeah, she's very, very cool. She's called Iz. She's
awesome.
She's my mate.
I'll have to go look. I don't know Oppidan. It's my wife. My wife works in event production coordination, and she is looking at booking DJs. Funny enough, for Cannes Lions, and she showed me a list of DJs. I, through nightclub parties and was very involved. Worked in the music business and was involved in that team for a very long time. I looked at the spreadsheet and was like, I don't know anything about any of these people except Horse Girl. And I think Horse Girl would be an absolutely hilarious choice for your Cannes Lions party.
I would genuinely love that. That would make me want to go to Cannes, and that's not something I've ever said before in my life.
But you can just, you can just imagine. It's like it's a sort of sedate cocktail hour with a kind of attractive woman in a horse mask, just playing banging techno. Like what could be weird about that? It's just.
So do you have to? Sorry, this is a tangent, but now I'm curious. Do you have to go to Cannes this year? Are you being put through the misery, or are you?
Oh, I don't ever have to go. I mean, and cards on the table, I quite enjoy it because what I find it to be a pull in the progress of the year. That I was talking about this yesterday on hip replacement. Or on Monday, the idea is that when you come out of Cannes, first you need like a big rinse, but then you sort of realize, all right, I've let all of these terms flow over me. I now need to strike them all from my vocabulary and reinvent the way I talk for the next year, right? So it's this sort of weird cathartic reset. And yes, it is. Debaucherous is probably too suggestive a word because it's not actually that debauched. It's excessive, certainly, but it's fun to see everybody and to kind of get back into that. So I make no apologies.
No apologies necessary. From what I've been told over the course of the past couple of years by friends who do still have to go for professional reasons, it's basically an extension. It's the start of the Hamptons season for the American social circle, because American agencies are the only ones who can fucking afford to send anyone to Cannes anymore. So it's basically you guys just coming over to south of France, annexing it for a week, and then leaving again, while a scattering of Europeans managed to kind of backpack their way there, sleeping in shared Airbnbs 9 to a room. Because there's simply no money in this fucking industry.
It is the best of times and the worst of times, after all.
Is the labor crisis?
I hate to be dad on the call, but there's something in a portmanteau of Dickens and Cannes that I think we can really do something with.
There we go. So, seriously, you have two actionable insights from this call already. We're doing well. Um, is the agency, because basically one of the other things that, and this is particularly relating to advertising, marketing, PR,
Yeah.
the agency landscape in London is so brutally fucked right now. I mean, literally from top to bottom. I can think of maybe four agencies I can, off the top of my head, that I know aren't doing it horrifically badly. And I also appreciate that we're a lot poorer than you guys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a similar kind of, oh dear God, this industry is absolutely fucked feeling where you guys are as well, or has it not quite reached that tipping point yet?
No, absolutely. I had a beer on Monday with a friend who runs a small shop. Let's say he's got 20 people,
Right.
indie, creatively led, strategically informed, all of this sort of stuff. And the kind of shop that should be winning at the moment because it's got very low overhead and fixed costs. It's creatively inspired. Obviously, the tool set has expanded in such an incredible way that like everybody can do everything kind of is the truth of the actionable environment. And then beyond that, he was a CMO of a consumer brand. He's got a great Rolodex and all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He was asking me, he was like, what are you like in the projects that you're participating in? Are you increasingly competing as essentially an independent against agencies from WPP, as a for
Yeah.
instance? And I don't know. I live in a little bit of a weird niche, so I don't see it as much, at least not that I'm aware of. But it is interesting to think, like, all right, I'm the big CPG, FMCG brand, as you guys would say. I'm the big brand coming in, and I'm going to call in the legacy brand, the legacy agency that's been around for 150 years, the cool creative shop, a la Wyden or Anomaly or 72 and Sunny or whatever, that's,
Yeah.
like, if not part of a holding company, then sort of holding company adjacent. And with all due respect to our friends at Wyden, who are fiercely independent, as I always say, the and then it's like this ragtag bunch of kids, and it's not to diminish his
Yeah.
skill set at all, but it's funny to think that that's the level of competition that's going on. So I think we see that, but I don't know that everybody thinks is scarcity fuck. Partially because so many people are just cleaving off little bits of business and going like, this is a great relationship that I have. I can
Yeah.
keep myself alive with this, and I have so much more capacity now, and there's so much more latitude for things to be done in a way that isn't programmatic. The way that I don't mean programmatic like inventory. I mean like protocol driven, I guess is
Yeah.
the way to say it. So anyway.
No, that all makes perfect sense. Thank you. Sorry, I bored you with a serious question there momentarily. But
You didn't. I mean, listen. That's whenever I can inject a little bit of seriousness into my levity-filled existence. I know that Ron was very. Well, Matt. So tell me, what was it this week that struck you as being salient in that list of links that I
Oh,
sent along?
so I wrote them down here. What did I write down? So I thought, what did I think was salient? I thought the coverage of the death of Sora was interesting. You put a link into that, and there's been a lot asked about that, and obviously because everyone entirely justifiably, because fuck me, they're increasingly looking like a cancer on humanity. Everyone loves to clown on OpenAI. Everyone does. And, it's funny that they spent all of this time developing this app that launched all this fanfare, but turns out was burning £1 million a day and no one ends up using it, blah, blah. But as often with a lot of the reaction to this stuff, the mere fact that this thing is being shuttered doesn't therefore mean that AI video is a bust and no one's ever going to use it again and we can all go back to pretending that it's all fine and artisanal. Like, the genie doesn't go back in the bottle. And I tend to find there's a certain annoyance that I have, particularly around these arguments, where people's desperate desire for this technology to fail and to fail spectacularly and take businesses down with it obscures them to the fact that this doesn't go away now. I don't know what you think is going to happen to all the open source models that don't, for example, need open AI, but getting better and better and better, and people using them, blah, blah, or the Chinese ones. Or let's say, for the sake of argument, the stuff that Google's making, which is better than Sora anyway, and comes from a company that can seemingly absorb near infinite capital losses because it makes more money than God. None of these things add up. And so whilst on the one hand, yay, one in the eye against Sam Altman, brilliant. I don't know, man. It doesn't feel like this incredible seismic and yeah, we're claiming back control that everybody thought. And yeah, fine, no one wants a social network made up of AI generated bullshit, or at least they don't want just for that. But I don't know. Have you looked at what other people's Facebook and Instagram feeds look like?
I confess that I have not.
So I genuinely recommend, and this is something that like people don't like doing, and I can kind of appreciate why. And I'm in a very privileged position here because I don't use TikTok, I don't use Instagram, so I don't have a For You page. But if you're in a room full of people and you ask them to show you their For You page, and I'm talking normal people. I'm not talking people like us who think about marketing and who think the vertical is a useful or sensible term to use for about anything. I'm talking about people like average fucking people. So I happened to see this with a friend of mine a few months ago, and he was trying to show me something on Instagram, scrolling through. I was like, Dave, have you noticed that 80% of this shit that you're scrolling through is just AI? He's like, what? It's like, all of this is AI. Oh, is it? I hadn't noticed. This isn't a stupid person. He worked for Accenture. That might make him a stupid person. I don't know. But you know what I mean? He has ostensibly a grown up real person's job, and he's like, this isn't going back. And the knee jerk anti reaction that so many people in particularly the creative communities or people who like to think of themselves as adjacent to creative communities to AI. It's lovely that you feel this way, and I applaud you fighting against the machine. You know what? I'm with you. Broadly speaking, conceptually, I'm with you. But you are not in any way representative of the greater mass of humanity, and you don't get to determine how the fuck this plays out. I'm sorry, you don't. And you look at the rest of the world, and you look at the number of people that are consuming content that is entirely AI generated in South Asia and Southeast Asia and all the rest of it. And those are the continents that are making the future. Realistically speaking, it ain't us. I don't know, man. I just don't see it as quite as apocalyptic for AI video as many of the commentators are taking it as being.
Yeah, I guess I don't see it as apocalyptic at all, except that it has the ability. It has an overweighted ability to move markets with news like that, and I think that's the thing that worries me the most, is that we are going through this this I mean, I would call it kind of a regression to the mean for AI, where I think AI seeds into the background and becomes like electricity. This is the thing that I've said a lot. It's like it is indubitably useful, valuable, powerful, and applicable to many, many, many different contexts. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the thing that just makes everything easier, right? And that's my long held belief. The problem with the closing of Sora or just any of OpenAI's foibles at the moment is that the downstream implications of all of that money being at risk means that everybody's sphincters get tight and they start making dumb short-term decisions.
Yeah. That
then disempower or endanger billions of people otherwise.
Very, very, very quick things here. Firstly, it does speak to my long-held belief that when we come to do the great reckoning of the 21st century, at least the early part of it, we're going to realize that the people who we really should have strung up early on with the fucking private equity and venture capital accounts, because so much of this is their fault. And secondly, and this is being proved by your president, his seemingly hourly mad utterances and the insane manner in which the global markets are responding to this. Markets are fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Like, we should stop. We should literally stop pegging things to what a bunch of fucking wankers with access to a Bloomberg terminal make of the news, because they make moronic decisions.
Well, I differ a little bit in that I don't know that the decisions that they make are are actually moronic when you consider the fact that they are totally driven by their personal incentive.
Sorry. They
You know what I mean?
They make decisions that have suboptimal outcomes for everybody who isn't very closely tied to that trade.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, and it's interesting, right? Like having sat, in commercial organizations where my job was not just to bring money in, but to understand a little bit like where that money went, how it operated, what the reasons that we were bringing it in for, et cetera, were for us not to, at the very first blush, look at somebody's incentive for anything is totally crazy to me. And yet, because we live in a culture where answers are so plentiful, you can say, why does something happen, and be given the most surface level response and take that as the deeper truth, when in fact it doesn't even scratch the surface of the deeper truth, right? And that's the thing that makes me particularly crazy about all of this stuff. Is like the incentive of the press is to try to take down these services which they see as existential threats to them. The incentive of the competitive companies is to eliminate competition such as they have a greater market share. The incentive of the president is to draw attention away from the things that he is doing that really are fucking us. And the incentive of the people is to digest information as quickly as possible so that they don't have to think too hard and burn too many of their fucking, the 10,000 steps that they did today on thinking. So
I agree.
In any case, I mean, look, this is the condition that we're fighting against, Matt, and I wonder, I don't know what there is to do but fight. Do you put any, so there was a lot of maxing in the newsletter this week. Do you put any stock into, these kids who are shopping mall maxing, getting out into real life and, experiencing things?
What I am going to say is that I don't know if we should give credit to that man. I don't want to give him credit for anything, but fuck it, we'll give credit to Clavicular for this one, because maxing linguistically is just a beautifully neat suffix. It really works. It communicates very clearly. It's Orwellian in many respects. It's like Newspeak, double plus maxing. It's kind of, we're there or thereabouts, same ballpark. I think kids are going out more and doing the rest of it. I think some kids are, I think extrapolating huge trends from it, like, it's very easy to slap a label on something that certain people are doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing I would say about that specific term is that there are two things specifically. Firstly, I think it's interesting that it's another piece of terminology that comes from gaming culture, which I think is interesting. It's the idea of min-maxing your stats is something that comes from people who are very serious about getting into the weeds about being good at a particular type of video game, right? But, particular strategy or playing games or something like that. You optimize your character build, minimize certain stats, maximize other ones, which affords you certain things in a play style or whatever, so you can do things better, blah, 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 blah. It's an interesting through line. Secondly, though, the other thing is that whilst it's from gaming culture, it's also got a lot of fairly horrible right-wing kind of coded things about it, right? And it's just another example. And this is something that we're seeing lots and lots and lots of. I wrote a piece about it about 5-6 months ago, actually, about how in pretty much every aspect of political discourse now, certainly in the manner in which it's reported, but also if you look at the records and transcripts of the House of Commons and things like that, you can see linguistic tics coming in. So for the sake of argument, right, we'll talk about the UK here. So over the course of the past year, as the British right has continued to foment fear and anxiety about immigration into this country and blah, 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 there has been increasing use of this specific terminology, worrying about the influx of, and I quote, men of fighting age into the country. And that started being said on YouTube and then on kind of right-wing news channels. And then it infiltrated its way into politician speak in the House of Commons. Then it kind of got into newspapers. And now right-wing newspapers will comfortably talk about the dangers of large numbers of men of fighting age. feels very COVID, doesn't it? So I did a little bit of research going back, and that comes from about 2020 from actual Nazis. Like you can literally find the Nazi forums. In fact, it was American Nazi forum. Sorry, everywhere has Nazis.
We've got the best Nazis, obviously.
I mean,
joking, people, joking.
Do you know what I mean? There's something really quite insidious and quite unpleasant about the way in which you can take something that is very, very, very clearly a dog whistle, and through repeated use, and like these people know how to do this now. It goes from very, very niche places to edgy communities to edgy YouTube to political YouTube to newspapers to politics, newspapers, TV, whatever, blah blah blah. It's your own media, depending on who you're trying to appeal to. But this is a well-known pathway now, and yet it keeps on happening, and we keep on seeing this maxing. I don't know. It feels like another example of, not even borderline fascistic ideology being kind of Trojan horsed into mainstream discourse in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable. But maybe I'm just overreacting to this month's horrible little fucking internet scrope that we decided to elevate to global fame. I don't know.
It's also interesting, but I have to say, I have a running joke with my 16-year-old and to some degree my 19-year-old who's at college, and so who I speak to less about this stuff, but it around the idea of Gen Z slang or extremely online slang. So an example being like low-genuinely, which is a insanely stupid portmanteau, but in any case, it is what it is. Low-genuinely, and my daughter said to me, she's like, "No, Dad, nobody says low-genuinely. They say low-Kirk-genuinely." And I say, "Why?" "Well, because Charlie Kirk." I was like, "Well, what does that have to do with anything?" And she's like, "Nothing. It just does." And then my son was telling me over the weekend, he was home from school, and he was telling me over the weekend, he was just like, "Yeah, no, nobody says low-Kirk-genuinely. They just say low-Cur." So now it's just I'm low-Cur, whatever the fuck it is that I'm doing. My point in bringing this up is that while that insertion of Charlie Kirk's name into the paradigm is weird and to my mind like distressing, it disappears almost immediately into something else, and the kids, I don't think, assign the level of meaning that I do to it. And so I wonder to what extent, like your concern is that the meaning, though buried, is still there and will then reanimate, or just that it's there in the first place.
It's there, it's carried with it. And whilst many people who engage with this sort of stuff won't think twice about it, there will be some for whom it resonates. And some things, look again,
men of fighting age.
That's kind of nonsensical. It's silly, and it's Harambe. You know what I mean? Like it's the same sort of shit written however many years later. Men of fighting age is kind of fucking pointy. And I could point you at half a dozen of similar linguistically loaded things that come either from incredibly anti-Muslim or incredibly anti-Semitic sources that have ended up becoming part of the political vernacular. Which is it's not an accident. I just think we could do with having better hygiene around this sort of stuff, because there are places where one would hope journalists are still doing this work. The mainstream media, for all that it is decried, for all that it is produced and hollowed out by the vicissitudes of billionaires, is still theoretically a place where people you would hope, pay attention to this sort of thing and maybe be careful about the language they use and what it means. And, I kind of hold out hope that people are going to start to try harder with this sort of stuff.
One thing to that end, like I think of, as when we talk about things like these, highly internet driven terms, I think of somebody like Ryan Broderick from Garbage Day, who is a former colleague and somebody that I'm friendly with, former guest of the show, but also is like, I think is very interested in getting to the roots of these phenomenon, exactly as you're describing, and then explaining them and bringing them to light. The problem that I have with the way that Ryan does it, if I'm going to level some criticism, is that there's an awful lot of hand wringing and there's an awful lot of like, woe is us, the sky is falling tone to it. And I wonder, you and I being, men of a certain vintage, the liberal equivalent to that term. No, but being older and probably having passed through a series of life stage changes where you start to go, actually, nothing is as dire or as good as you expect it to be. I wonder if we're like able to apply a little bit of critical distance, or if in fact we all should be as upset as Ryan is, and that the sky may actually be falling.
It's a really, really good question. I mean, I don't know, man. I can't speak for you, but personally speaking, let's say I have been. I can say this. I'm not embarrassed. I'm 46 years old. I would say I have been reasonably across the news, information, etc., 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 for about 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
Some of that was pre-internet. Most of that has been post-internet, but still. It feels to me, based on my experience of having 3 decades of exposure to shit going on, that the past 10 years has seen an acceleration and a speeding up of how ideas and things move through cultural spaces that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And things happen in a way now that they simply never did previously, and that is categorically different. And so I would argue that whilst, we can be a little bit more sanguine about these things, we have a great degree of experience and draw on, and we can go, well, actually, back in the Great Panic of 2004, or whatever the fuck it is.
I remember
2004 was a very long time. Yeah, exactly. It was a big one. We were all talking about. But 2004 was a very, very, very different time. The world worked in a very, very different way in 2004. I think it's important that. I agree with you that hand wringing is unhelpful because telling people that something is wrong without offering them any opportunity to engage with ideas about how to counter the wrong or to ameliorate the wrong feels like maybe unhelpful. It's also fair to say that I think we're right to wring our hands, because going back to what we were saying right at the beginning about very complex systems and no one understanding how they work anymore, we have created an informational ecosystem that is so incredibly complex and that is governed by mechanisms and processes and levers that even the people who built and instituted the mechanisms, processes, and levers do not and cannot possibly understand anymore. But I do think it behooves us to be a little bit more worried than previously we might have been. Simply because we don't, 20 years ago, right, briefly speaking, if I met someone in the UK, I might not know the first thing about them. And I think you could probably apply it to the States as well. But I would have a reasonable idea based on who they were, what they said to me, how they spoke, how they dressed, what their background was, etc. All things that I could pick up just conversationally or eye testing. Where they would have got their information from, what sort of information it was likely to be, and the vague idea about sort of things that they might have thought, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be right? But it would have given me a vague ballpark. Now, I have no fucking idea, and no one else has any fucking idea either. No one knows how anyone gets the shit that they consume through the little magical box in their pocket. No one knows what magical process that information has gone through. No one could possibly tell. Which means that we don't have the mechanisms available to ourselves to be able to adequately assess and triage the media environment in which we exist, the impact it's having on people, and how we fundamentally alter the manner in which information is delivered to people at the point of consumption.
So you're bullish then?
I am. I'm like Cassandra, but I'm wrong. So think of it that way. I'm also very wrong about lots of shit. So
yeah. Well, look, as am I. Well, listen, Matt, I don't think you're wrong about that, and I also think that it's a condition that can be combated only through the kind of considered and artisanal work, if I can call it that you do with Web Curios. So keep up the good work on that. I will continue to be inspired by it, even as I go on my new journey of discovery with SIC. Well, everybody, this has been SIC Talks number 119 with Matt Muir. You can find him at webcurios.co.uk. And again, I strongly recommend that you sign up for it. It's an excellent newsletter and an excellent source of inspiration and curiosity. And other than that, Matt, I hope that London it springs to life in fecund creativity through its current griminess and Steve Sands.
It's all fine, man. I'm going to go and have a spliff now. It'll all be okay.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, Matt, great to talk to you.
You too, mate.
Again soon, I hope. And in the meantime, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And we'll
Cheers,
see you
dude.
again soon. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers. Yep.